Some in the Rockford community stand up by shutting down. Small businesses shut their doors and community members hit the streets as part of a national protest against federal immigration enforcement.
The Department of Homeland Security's crackdown in Minneapolis triggers an impromptu national shutdown. WIFR's Nathaniel Langley learns what the protest looks like in the Forest City.
Jake, Sydney, DHS operations in Chicago, Minneapolis, and elsewhere have killed a handful of Americans. Some in Rockford believe the best way to hold the department accountable is protesting.
I'm just scared.
Catalina Rodriguez carries two signs through downtown Rockford.
I'm a child of immigrant parents. They fought hard to give me a life that they couldn't have.
The Rockford resident anxiously watches federal immigration operations in Chicago and Minneapolis.
I'm carrying my birth certificate and all of my identification in my backpack right now, just in case I get stopped. And that's ridiculous.
Rodriguez joins a day-long general strike against the Department of Homeland Security.
What are we going to lose? Well, potentially everything. What am I going to lose today? Some money.
Mays Books is one of a handful of the city's small businesses joining the national shutdown.
So the only power we have is our numbers.
The protest calls for 24 hours of no school, work, and shopping.
It's about showing that people can organize and this is possible.
DHS says its enforcement officers risk their lives to arrest the worst of the worst.
You cannot protect Americans while you kill Americans.
WIFR reached out to the department for comment but have yet to hear back. It previously stated 70% of immigration and customs enforcement arrests nationwide were of undocumented immigrants charged or convicted of a crime in the U.S.
It's all lies.
Rodriguez remembers the lives of citizens and more killed by DHS officers.
There shouldn't be this level of terror with everybody. There should be people doing more and people above us that we should be relying on to be doing more.
Other businesses like Rooted, Rockford Roasting Company, and the Scrap Jar participated in the national shutdown. Mays Books may join another general strike if one is planned for next Friday.
Tom Homan, the White House's border czar, says to expect a reduction in the number of enforcement officers in Minnesota. He added that operation will become safer and more efficient.